So I thought it would be useful to put together a couple of slides and a video just to kind of give you an overview of the tiny house project at Bryant Street. This is it completed. Once it was completed, it got a lot of attention, so I looked at the idea of probably providing information to all kinds of people. People were asking questions about, floor plans, how it was constructed. So I kind of coined the term S-House, the idea of small, simple, and sustainable. And that kind of led me to do some research on the project. And I thought one of the important things about this idea about tiny living is really just a scaling of what actually household sizes are. So I did a little research. Turns out in the city of Buffalo, 32% of people are single person households in owner occupied housing units. That's of owner occupied out of 100%. And 60% of owner occupied units are two people at the max. So really, this idea of a house as being a many bedroom family kind of cohort is really more mythology than actual fact. And so there's this huge opportunity for us to look at tiny houses as a solution for single people, people who are aging out of their larger houses and looking for more sustainable living situations. So it's just part of the overall narrative of this idea of the tiny house movement. Our house was located on property that was going to be a community garden, so it was up for sale. I said was going to be a community garden. It existed as a community garden. This picture on the left is the existing community garden as it was when the lot went up for sale. We knew it was going to be contentious with some early discussions with people around the neighborhood. So I began to do some examinations of what scale of house we would be putting into it, how we would be preserving the gardens going forward. Even the idea of introducing a path through the kind of cut through on a corner lot. Our tiny house has a lot of advantages to it. One of them is obviously the construction, the simplicity of it. And to express that kind of simplicity, this is the full documentation, technical documentation that we use to get the building permit. You can see this was generated on September 12th, 2005. It's kind of important to notice that this is September of the year of the construction that we're going to be doing it in, because going forward, you'll see what kind of time it took us to do the full construction. So just a quick overview of what a full set would require: a site plan, locating the house on the site, setbacks, making sure things are conform with the zoning, first floor plan, front side elevations of the building, a building section to indicate the kind of framing details, the foundation details. This is an electrical diagram at the bottom for lighting layout. A couple of details of things like the dormer elements and the foundation, which I have a larger drawing of coming up. A riser diagram for the plumbing waste vent system. Roof framing, excuse me, probably absolutely not necessary for this. I don't know why I actually included it in this series. It may have been a question that the inspector had. We built this, it was myself, my wife helped, and a friend put in well over 100 hours in helping us construct it. This is the start of the construction. Here we are in the corner placing these 2x12 boards around the perimeter of our foundation. We've excavated out the plantings, removed the topsoil, and we're ready to start digging the trenches now that we've created the formwork around our foundation. The motivation for the crew was typically food. This is the plumbing diagram, excuse me, the plumbing that was required for the building. So here we have a shower drain. This is a vent line. This is the toilet. This will be where the toilet will be. And this will be where the connections for the bathroom sink, the laundry, and for the kitchen will terminate here. But once again, very simple layout for plumbing. This is a detail of the trench for the foundation footer. Shallow frost protected, so we have 2 inches of foamular insulation on the outside. That will be the concrete will be cast against that. We have 2 pieces of rebar on hats in order to put them up into the concrete to make sure they're sufficiently embedded. Here we are prepared now for the concrete to be poured. We have a mesh to deal with shrinkage cracking and a vapor barrier underneath that. There's no insulation underneath the foundation. It could be, but because of our floor construction, we opted to put that up above the slab itself. This is a detail of the shallow frost protected footing, outlining that idea of it being 1 foot below grade, and a couple of other details along with that. We had a crew down the street that was pouring a concrete step, repairing it, and I asked them if they would be interested in doing this pour for us. I think we paid them about $700 or $800 in order to be on site that day that the concrete was poured. This seemed like a huge undertaking for 2 people in order to make sure that we got it right before the concrete set. So I thought the investment was well worth it. Now, remember that date I told you, September 12th? That was when we were around the time we were filing for a building permit. I believe we still needed to go through a variance procedure in order to be allowed to build on that site. I'm not exactly sure that timeline, but here we have this is in the concrete of the foundation, October 5th, 2005, some 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks after we'd submitted building plans. So that just is to indicate how quickly you can build a shallow frost protected foundation. Another advantage of that is that we now have a platform in order to do the framing construction. So here I am framing out the end wall section. It looks like I have a side wall section already framed here. This was a really beautiful fall we had. So we had really an extensive amount of good weather through September and October and even into November. Like I said, our food, a huge motivator. So here we are. This is another friend of mine who had come many times to help us put walls up into position. So I'd frame the thing on the deck, and I need help doing the tilt up of it. So I'd call somebody, they'd stop by, and payment might be lunch. So here we are moving along with the framing. Walls are up. Oops, site inspectors. My friend who did a lot was very helpful. Was also a steel worker, so he had no problems doing the things that terrified me the most. So he had no problem climbing up at the ridge to help nail the ridge board in place. So here we are working through the framing, the roof framing. The open areas are where the dormers are going in. So these are headers for the dormers. Now we have the interior framed out. We're probably close to putting, this is now, we've actually moved quite a bit ahead now. This could be as late as November, although I'm a little bit confused on that, the exact time schedule. But we have our electrical work in. This is all work that I've done myself. The electrical work is in. All of the rough drain lines are in. And some of the supply lines are in place, maybe most of them. It looks like I have even the stubs down for the hot water tank. Buildings require a lot of insulation. Our little tiny house is no exception. So this just seems like an astronomical amount, but this is, the large bags are mostly for the roof, which has 12 inches of insulation. These packs in the back are 19 for the wall insulation. Jumping ahead probably about a week or 2 weeks or so, we have the drywall in place now, and we're starting to do finishing. We don't really have heat in the building, so I've got a kerosene heater here to help facilitate the drying of the plastering as we're doing it. Like I said, we didn't put insulation in the floor. We put it up on the slab, mostly because I was going to run this PEX tubing for the floor heating, and I was afraid of doing both projects in the concrete for fear I would damage the PEX tubing. So foamular insulation, cut out with a hot knife to accept the PEX tubing to run the hot water under, a pour attempt at using aluminum foil to distribute heat away from that tube. This should be much heavier, I learned later. Here's the laminate flooring that will go over the top of it, our finished flooring. And here we are now with the finished flooring in place, the kitchen fixtures roughly sitting where they're going to be, the hot water tank. This is an animation of the idea of this house now being a prefabricated assembly. And I had done this sometime later after the house was constructed with the idea that maybe somebody else would want to start to make a bunch of these. So these are the prefabricated components, and then an idea about how you could come on site and in one day, once the slab was poured, erect the whole house. This is us probably, like I said, this was really a terrific year. This might be late fall. We're weather tight. We're probably almost completely finished on the inside, and we've held off doing any exterior work, um, mostly because it's just colder outside, and we had a lot of work to do on the inside. Here it is with siding. This is the spring. This is well after we've occupied the house now, but we didn't need to finish the exterior by painting it yet. Um, it wasn't just a requirement to get our certificate of occupancy. And here's the house painted. This is probably taken a few years later, but just a remarkable difference in adding the paint to giving the house a complete and a much more attractive look. And once again, this idea of the garden's really extremely important to this project, the integration. Building a house as a slab on grade allowed us to have no decking. You step out of the house, so the connection between the inside and outside can be really strong. It got a lot of attention, actually more attention than we thought it would be, and positive attention. We went into it with a lot of concerns by the neighbors. We had 60 people that were at the variance meeting for getting the zoning approval, and I think it was 60. There was like 40. It was a 40-20 split on against 40 against 20 for us. So we did have to make a compelling case for it. Anyway, we got a lot of press for it. It was in the Buffalo Spree a couple of times, the Buffalo News. It was in HGTV, in the intro to the series, so it got a lot of airplay and little short clips. This is just some interior shots of it finished that were in the Buffalo Spree. And once again, this idea of this integration into the garden, we thought turned out really successful. The neighbors, in the end, were really happy. I don't think there's anyone who's disgruntled about the final project that happened. And now going forward, a lot's changed in the last 15 years. The city of Buffalo now has a green code that accepts the idea of what's called accessory dwelling units, and this idea of detached ones, another second building on a lot, is a great opportunity for this idea of tiny houses or small additional buildings, and the code allows for it relatively simply. So there's a lot of opportunities going forward for exploring the tiny house movement to satisfy community needs. So I hope this is a good overview to help us decide what we might want to do when we look at presenting this to students.